Arfield, 1-0 Burnley! Scott Arfield! He's been threatening that recently, and all the Burnley players run to the Darwin end.
Burnley win the next ball. It's Rory now. On the outside, decent.
Barnes! He got it! Ashley Barnes with it! What a cross from Rory! And there was Ashley Barnes! And Burnley leading the derby.
Knocks it quickly, finds Benson in space at the byline. Can Burnley get a goal here? Back for Brownell, saved by the keeper.
Burnley won it to the end. That is magnificent. They deserve that.
On it by Paul Pantella, off for a hat-trick.
He's got it. Hat-trick for Nathan Teller. Oh, he's on fire at the minute. 3-0 Burnley. It's Nathan Teller's day.
Burnley are 3 up here. Fantastic derby. Here's Benson. Can he go on the outside? Comes inside. Comes up a shot.
Oh, the goal. Manuel Benson once more. That is top class.
Burnley have done it. Fantastic. The Claret deserve the championship title. They've been the best side throughout the campaign. Burnley have won the second tier. What a fantastic achievement. The players have been magnificent.
Yes, hello everyone and welcome along to the latest instalment of the Turfcast podcast pre-game show with me, Joe Redmond, ahead of Burnley's game at Turf Moor against Norwich City on Friday night under the lights. And with the games coming thick and fast, that means the podcast come thick and fast. You guys know the drill. Obviously, literally just done, or it feels like I've just done the full-time show from the draw against Derby County. And now we're straight on to the pre-game show for the game against Norwich City. But as usual, for the pre-game shows, I'm always pleased to introduce a fan or a journalist in some instances of the opposition. And I'm pleased to introduce Adam from the Pink and Podcast. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Yeah, kind of waiting for the season to be over, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that leads nicely into sort of like my first question then, really. Yeah, we'll go to that one first then. So is it a case of Norwich City are on the beach now? I just very quickly had a look at the league table before we started recording on your channel. If you guys want to go and check that out, you can do now. Norwich City have kind of like fallen in a similar fashion to Blackburn, really. Like all the way down in 11th now. You were knocking on the doors of the playoffs. But 53 points, Coventry on 62 points. So, yeah, it's not looking like you're going to get that, is it? Is it a case of on the beach then for Norwich?
Yeah, that's definitely the case now. They've had too many missed opportunities really over recent weeks. There was a spell a couple of weeks back now, probably, or maybe the sort of end of February time, early March. And we went to Blackburn, ironically, and went 1-0 up in the 92nd minute. And I think at that point, Norwich would have been just about a point or 2 points outside the top six. Blackburn with down to 10 men at that point as well, 96th minute get an equaliser, and that's pretty much been a familiar tale for Norwich for most of this season in games where they've dominated for sort of 45, 60 minutes at some points, and then they managed to concede soft goals, which has been sort of a recurring theme, and they've sort of to address that, I suppose, over the recent times. A couple of home games now back-to-back with clean sheets against West Brom and Sunderland, and it's kind of been lacking a little bit down the other end, I suppose, in scoring goals that they've been so good at this season. I think, only sort of Leeds have outscored them at different points. So, yeah, it's been a familiar tale, up and down season, a bit of a roller coaster, and we've got to this point where it's kind of where I thought they would be in a transitional sort of season under a new manager, lots of new players, very much middle of the pack, and I think next season is probably going to be where the judgment of this group and this manager is going to be at.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's almost like this is planned, but that does lead me on brilliantly again to sort of like the way you ended that question then to my next question. You just said there you expected Norwich to be in this position. So are you happy with how the season's gone? Are you disappointed? Talk to me about your season so far. Obviously down in 11th, and I always feel like a club like Norwich should be at the very minimum banging on the door of the playoffs, especially, and I mean this with no disrespect to Bristol City, they have been absolutely fantastic, but especially when you see clubs like Bristol City in there as well, teams like Norwich should be there or thereabouts. Obviously football isn't played like that, of course it isn't, but you said you're in like a transitional season. Are you relatively happy with how it's gone then, this transitional season?
Yeah, I think fan frustration generally is not so much at this campaign and the way it's unfolded. It was one that definitely from the outset, the club communicated it externally. This is going to be transitional. Give us time. It requires patience. They've obviously had a change of head coach, Torp arriving from Denmark, never managed in England. You've got a lot of young players that have come in the building that have never stepped foot in England before or never played it in the Championship. And we all know, obviously, notoriously how difficult the Championship is. 46-game grind, week in, week out, is something a lot of these players have not been used to. Change of ownership at the top as well. Delia and Michael stepping down for the first time in almost 30 years to see that the Atanasios, who are sort of an American group, arrive. So there's been a lot of changes sort of on and off the field. So I think in that sense, the transitional season and sort of mid-table sort of finish, I don't think that's kind of where the frustration's at. The anger's really come from the fact that Norwich are slowly drifting now for 2 or 3 years. You know, they were in the Premier League, they get relegated. Obviously, the first time back in the Championship is your best opportunity to get back to the Premier League. That season, they finished mid-table under sort of Dean Smith and then David Wagner. Last season, they do get into the playoffs, sneak into 6th place, get absolutely hammered at Ellen Road in the second leg of the semi-final. And that still gives me PTSD to this day, hearing their fans singing their songs towards the end and sort of knowing they were going to Wembley. But then this season, I think, you get into a third season in the Championship and you're kind of told it's going to be mid-table and transitional. Fans are paying a pretty high price in terms of the Championship for football. I think we've got maybe at least certainly one of the most expensive season tickets in the league. Obviously got a pretty loyal fan base in a region where it's, Norwich dominate, unfortunately, over Norfolk. There's no other sort of senior professional team. Yeah. Kings Lynn are sort of the only ones down in the National League North. So that just goes to show the pull of the football club. So I think the fact that there's been a period of drift, I think that's where the anger's at more than kind of this season being mid-table. It puts a lot of pressure on next season. I think if they don't get it right and they're not in and around the top 6, I could see a lot of fans starting to turn, unfortunately.
Yeah, so what is the ambition for next season then? What sort of thing you're expecting? You mentioned there in and around the top 6. It's going to be difficult. I'm not saying Norwich aren't capable, but obviously you've got the 3 that are coming down from the Prem, obviously Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich. Obviously you guys will have different opinions on Ipswich, but I thought that they recruited relatively well for a Championship side. And now if they keep hold of them players, they might do well. But they've got players there like Norwich and O'Shea who we thought would stay and then left at the first opportunity. So you're never sure what's going to happen with that. Leicester, are they going to have PSR problems? Southampton, it's going to be difficult to shake it. So some people do think that the 3 coming down from the Prem are going to be difficult. And then you've got potentially one of Leeds, Burnley or Sheffield United staying down. Leeds and Sheffield United are probably, I might get crucified for saying this on here, but probably your worst worry if them 2 stay down because they've both got rich benefactors. Obviously, Leeds have got the 49ers and Red Bull. Sheffield United have just got some new owners. I'm not sure if we stayed down, if we could really be as good next season as we are this season. So you're looking at next season. Are you thinking playoffs minimum or put up a fight for the playoffs? Or you maybe thinking you can push on for top 2?
I think the benchmark has got to be top 6. I think anything short of that and the fans will start to grow in the frustration that's certainly been started to sort of, I suppose, boil under a little bit. You go on social media, which is always a dangerous place to go in terms of fan opinion, but it's certainly turned quite angry in kind of recent weeks. And I think, the fact that they bought a lot of players for relatively big money in the Championship, they signed a few players over the sort of £6-7 million bracket in the last summer. And don't get me wrong, these are younger type players that are sort of been brought in for the longer term rather than a short-term view, but some of them haven't quite kicked on yet. And, there's obviously the risk there that have you spent a reasonable sum of money in the Championship and not really got a return on your investment. I think the big summer is coming ahead, though, because there's going to be a massive turn of the wheel again. They've got a lot of experienced pros out of contract, the likes of Ono Hernandez, who's been here for a long time, Jakob Sorensen been here for a long time, Angus Gunn looks like he's going to depart, his contract's up, and then you're going to probably be losing. Certainly, Borja Sainz, I think, will be on his way, given he's got 12 months left on his deal, and I think his form's tailed off a little bit. Josh Sargent has played for Norwich now for 4 years, 3 of those in the Championship, and consistently proved that for me he's one of, if not the best striker in this league and at this level. So I think there's going to be inevitably be interest in him ahead of a homecoming World Cup for him next year as well. So you lose those players, and then you're kind of looking around and you're thinking, well, who else have we got left? And it does look a little bit sort of scarce and a little bit, so a few fears, I suppose, from some fans that there's not a lot in the tank, but it's all on this summer. They're going to recruit a decent amount of money, and the good thing is that they're not really in a place where under Delia it was very much when you sell a big player for big money, you kind of have to keep aside a lot of that money for other things, where this time under the group they're now under, they can basically reinvest that money straight back into the playing squad. So they're going to have a reasonable amount of money. It's about spending it well, and if they get that right, then I think they could replicate trying to get into the top 6. It's kind of what they've done, I suppose, back in the day under Daniel Farke. They lost a lot of their sort of key players and had a transitional season. Next year they won the league. I'm not suggesting I don't think Norwich are going to be doing that, but I do think they'll have a better season next year. But it's a case of whether they, I suppose, can bridge that gap to, as you mentioned, a lot of the sides that are coming down that I think will be strong again.
Yeah, you touched on him briefly. New manager, Thorup. He's coming. Did he come in the summer?
Yep.
Yeah. So, what are the fans' opinions on him then at the minute? Are the fans happy with him, or are the fans sort of like? I know we've touched on the transitional season and stuff already, but are fans sort of like happy with him and happy where he is as a manager and where he's got you to this season? But again, main judgment will be next season. Is that the overriding opinion with the fans?
Yeah, I think so. It's a little bit split. There's a few sort of fans that are very much in the camp, willing to give him time, seen enough progress at different points this season. I mean, certainly in and around October, November, Norwich are playing some brilliant football. You know, they were sort of putting teams to the sword. I remember them beating Watford 4-1 at home, 4-0 against Hull. They've had some other results where they've beaten teams pretty convincingly, 5-1 against Swansea, 4-2 against Luton. You know, the home form's not really been too much of an issue up until late, where they've sort of taken a little bit of a nosedive, but it's kind of been those issues on the road. And I think the fact he's trying to play quite a expansive attacking sort of brand of football and obviously go into some tough places where, you know, teams inevitably at home are desperate for points. It's not worked. Norwich have been beaten on too many occasions, and the defensive side of the game is definitely a problem with his style. They've not managed to sort of shut it out, I suppose, at the back, and they leak far too many goals to make it competitive. I mean, you know, the amount of goals they've scored versus what they conceded. I mean, they should be winning more games than they have, basically. But because they've not really been beaten convincingly by anyone, but they just concede in every single game. I think only Plymouth have got less clean sheets. So that's kind of the root of the problem. And the fans maybe feel he's not quite addressed that until late, where he has a little bit more, as I mentioned, in recent home games, 2 back-to-back clean sheets. But the game against West Brom, he sort of put a bank of 5 at the back, which didn't go down too well because Norwich were pretty negative in that game. I think their lowest possession over the course of the season. And thankfully, Josh Sargent pops up in the 90th minute to grab the win, which obviously slightly changes the mood. You know, I think if that game ends 0-0, I really think it starts to spill over and some fans start to get quite angry. So, yeah, very mixed. I think next season he's got to get it right. He's got to learn from what he's kind of put right and put wrong, I suppose, this season. And fingers crossed he does, because, if not, it's going to be another turn of the wheel, I think, and fans will be wanting him gone. And I don't really know what direction they go in again, because they've ultimately embarked on this project. That's kind of, you know, where they've put all their resource. And if it doesn't work, then, I don't really know what the next step is.
Yeah, fair enough. Obviously, on screen now, Norwich's recent results. So going back as far as the 1st of March, 1-1 away at Blackburn. I know you mentioned that already. A late goal, Blackburn down to 10. So poor result in that context. Obviously, a poor result at home to Oxford as well. I know they're down there, they're battling for their lives. They've picked up a little bit recently. Obviously, a big shout out to them for beating Sheffield United recently. But a poor result at home. Obviously, you've got to be looking at games like that and hoping to win them. Losing away at Sheffield Wednesday, losing away at Bristol City, and obviously the West Brom game that you mentioned there, but then losing away at Plymouth as well, which is another poor result. And the Sunderland game, to be fair, that's not a bad result. That's a decent draw, that, against a good side. But you mentioned earlier the form's kind of sort of like tailed off a little bit. What's different then now between these results and the start of the season and the games where you've just mentioned, where you were beating teams convincingly?
I think injuries and suspensions have played their part throughout the whole of this season, to be honest. I mean, Norwich were about Josh Sargent for, I think it was about 14 games in the end. And, you know, I mean, I know he's kind of been back in recent times and his goal record speaks for itself. He's the 3rd highest goal scorer in the league, despite missing 14 games. I mean, that kind of just shows his pedigree as a goal scorer at this level. Paul Signs has definitely not been the same player in the second part of the season as he was in the first part of the campaign. I mean, 15 goals by November and only 2 since, kind of shows, you know, the sort of drop off in his levels. And I just think that the levels of consistency and the fact that he just concedes soft goals has definitely been a recurrent issue, definitely in recent times. And you look at some of those games there. I mean, Sheffield Wednesday was a prime example. They were 2-0 up, brilliant for 45 minutes. Second half, 12-minute spell, Sheffield Wednesday scored 3 goals and come away with 3 points. So that just goes to show, really, that the soft underbelly, I suppose, that's in this group. And is it a mentality thing? Is it a mindset thing? I don't know how they shift that, because they've had a lot of these players and they've recruited different players, and it still seems to be a problem under a different manager. So clearly there's some work to be done behind the scenes, because ahead of next season, because that's been a problem now for 2 or 3 seasons. Not so much the goal scoring. I think, you know, Norwich, even next season, if they lose Signs and Sargent, I think they've got the materials and the younger players coming through that they'll still score goals in the system that Thorup sort of identified and wants to play. But inevitably it does come with conceding goals at the other end, and they just can't seem to turn that tap off.
Yeah, fair enough. You mentioned earlier issues on the road, and sort of like went into sort of like describe the attacking football and the way that Thorup plays can be a little bit sort of like, you didn't say this word, but sort of like suicidal football, kamikaze sort of like football. Is that how you're expecting him to set up this weekend against Burnley? Because a lot of Burnley fans will be listening to that and thinking, absolutely superb. You can come at Burnley all you want. We've got the best defence in the league. Going forward, we might not be great. But then, Burnley have struggled at home. And again, we struggled at Derby. Although Derby, I wouldn't say Derby just defended, but they turned it into a battle, as I said on your show. But we've struggled at home against a lot of teams and just say, right, 2 banks of 4, you've got to come and break us down. But I don't think Norwich will be playing like that, will they?
I certainly wouldn't have thought that up until recent weeks. That West Brom game was kind of a pretty alarming change from Torp. Going from a system that he's played all season, very much 4-3-3, very attacking, not really concerned about the defence, and then to the West Brom game where he put 5 at the back at home. Norwich sat back, had the lowest possession, as I mentioned, and it was pretty turgid watch, to be honest. It kind of threw me back a little bit to David Wagner and the fans last season. Didn't like his style of football because even though it was effective and getting wins, and ironically, you spoke around, on our show, the Burnley fans maybe this season not been as bothered about the style because you just keep winning games. Norwich fans didn't like that last season. They got in the top 6 playing that way, and they were like, no, we need to go back to what we've kind of always been, a very attacking brand of football, entertaining, good to watch, lots of goals. And that's obviously been the case for most of this season, but I think the frustration around the way they were conceding goals needed to change. He addressed that, put 5 at the back at home. The football was poor. They obviously managed to get the win, and even after the win, the fans were still frustrated. And I remember in the post-match interview after that game, we sort of posed a question to him, would you ever go back to that? And he said, it depends on the opponent. Depends on who's available, and Norwich are about a left back at the moment, so they're kind of going to have to play someone out of position. And the fact he's now gone back to 4 at the back in recent games, certainly at Plymouth, they got exposed at different points again with pacey players in behind and 4 at the back. So I really wouldn't be shocked to see him go for a 5 at the back at Turf Moor, just given that the nature of the game and the fact that Burnley are going to be coming on to Norwich, knowing that there's an opportunity there, given they play on the Friday night, to try and get the 3 points and bridge that gap a little bit more to Sheffield United. So for those purposes, I could very much see him going for a 5 at the back, sitting back a little bit. Norwich trying to hit you on the transition, which they do have the pace, obviously, and the attacking quality to do that, because they've got midfielders that are capable of playing those passes to the likes of Sainz, to Sinats, to Josh Sargent. I think the attacking quality in that sense, they've got the ability to score a goal and try and find a 1-0 win. So I think that's the way he might go, unfortunately.
Yeah, 5 at the back does worry me slightly. Derby went 5 at the back, and we have struggled against 5 at the back over the course of the season. So fingers crossed he doesn't. He goes 4 at the back and just throws the ball forward and leaves loads of gaps at the back. That would be great, Thorpe, if you're watching this, please. But obviously, no, I'm joking. Obviously, he's got his own club to think about. I do want to touch on something you mentioned not that long ago. You said Borja Sainz hasn't been great in the second half of the season. Any particular reason? Has he just gone off form? I think he picked up an injury at one point, or is he just not fitting into a change of system or something like that? Why has he not been as good in the second half?
Yeah, he's had a strange season, really. I don't actually think he's been that good in terms of his general play over the course of the campaign, but his goal record kind of skews that a little bit. You kind of go back to that sort of first 3 months of the season, and it felt like he got the ball in sort of anywhere on the edge of the box. He'll hit it and it will find the back of the net. You just kind of encouraging him to shoot. The fans that kind of knew at that point that anytime he had the ball, just hit it, mate, because you're gonna score it. And that was kind of the case, and it was just. That's what you get with football. When you have momentum and you're scoring goals and you have that belief that you're going to just keep scoring. I think he had that at that point, but his general creation as a wide man wasn't really there. I mean, his assist tally is not the best in and around the wingers of this league for the amount of output that Norwich have in terms of goal scoring, and the fact they have Josh Sargent, who's a goal scorer. His general play is actually not that great, but I think what maybe made the difference for him is in the first half of the season, Sargent was injured. He kind of took it upon himself to be the talisman, the man to sort of pull Norwich through games since the new year. Obviously, Sargent's been back available, so maybe the spotlight's been off him a little bit. So whether that's playing into it a little bit, he sort of plays with an edge as well. That kind of that nature where when he sort of embraces it and he puts it on a good side of things, he can be really, really dangerous. But sometimes he gets really frustrated within games, and you can see it certainly in recent weeks. I think the fact he probably knows he's off in the summer and Norwich are not playing very well, he'll try and take on 3 or 4 men, lose the ball, and rather than get straight back up and try and win it back, it's kind of throwing a bit of a tantrum, and you sort of see him punching the ground, that kind of nature. So. Yeah, it's been a very inconsistent and strange season for him, but obviously, still topping the charts in terms of goal scoring. So he's still a danger man for this group. But I think the injuries as well have not helped. Had a spell out injured. He also had a suspension for 6 games due to a spitting incident at Sunderland away in December, where he sort of I suppose, spat in the direction of Chris Mepham slightly downwards towards his shorts. The FA obviously picked that up, and after a match report, he got suspended for 6 games, which I think, when he was in a good vein of form, and then suddenly you're out of the team for I think it was nearly 10 games after the time with the injury. That can obviously stifle momentum as well. So there's been a few different factors. I think most Norwich fans, weirdly enough, are actually kind of looking forward to him departing in the summer, because I think there's a feeling that Norwich as a team probably played better without him.
Interesting. I'd love somebody like him at Burnley Football Club. Whether we could afford him or whether he'd have his heart set a little bit higher is obviously a different debate. Another player that worries me is obviously Josh Sargent. He's come back in from injury recently. Like you said, he scored the goal against West Brom, I think it was. How's he been playing?
Yeah, he's been back to his best, really. Injuries have been a problem for him ever since he arrived from Werder Bremen to Norwich from the minute one, really, in the Premier League. Initially, it was kind of him having to battle with Teemu Pukki. Obviously, anybody who knows Pukki's record at Norwich knows that finding that number 9 shirt of him was always going to be a battle. And then when Pukki departs after a relegation for the Premier League, Pukki stuck around for the first season in the Championship, wasn't quite at his best at that point. His age was kind of going against him, and he departs. Josh Sargent takes the number 9 shirt, and ever since then, he's kind of just grown in confidence. The fact he's the main man, and Norwich have got the attacking players and always want to play a style of play that obviously creates some opportunities. He thrives in that sort of system, and I think that's kind of been to his benefit now. Played in the Championship for 3 years. I think he's got double figures in all of them. Bear in mind the amount of games he's been out. It's probably almost a season, really, when you sort of add it all together, because he was out for a good 3 months last season, 3 months or so this season. And that's kind of the frustration. I think if there wasn't the injury elements to his game, I don't think he'd have been a Norwich player at this point. I think somebody else would have come in probably last summer, maybe even the summer before, and snapped him up. But yeah, just his general play as well, the ability to hold up the ball, link up play. He's pretty much just the all-round number 9. I think there's other strikers in the league that are probably better at individual things. There's probably better finishers in the league. There's probably better players at heading the ball. There's probably better players at the link-up play. But I think as a complete number 9, which obviously generally in football these days, there is a bit of a lack of number 9s. He is probably one of the ones that in the Championship and this level, and probably across England at the moment, that will definitely have interest this summer. I could see Premier League teams coming in. I also think that there's probably an MLS element to it. Last summer, there was a few MLS teams kind of sniffing about. Obviously, we've seen Latte Laff leave Middlesbrough for the MLS for sort of over £20 million. And Josh Sargent obviously fits that bracket. I think, the fact that he obviously is American and his family, I think, are maybe a little bit feeling that they want to move back towards the sort of homeland, I suppose. That might play into it. So I fear he's probably going to be gone. So again, 5 more games to enjoy him. But he's definitely a danger man, because you give him any opportunity in and around the box, and he probably finds the bottom of the net.
Yeah, he's another one who I would delightfully have at Turf Moor, probably more than Signs, because I think that is a proper weak spot for Burnley, a proper good number 9. Again, whether he's got his sights set higher. If we're in the Premier, it's interesting though, because a Leeds fan asked me not that long ago, would I take him if we went up? And I actually leant more towards no, because I'd want somebody who was proven in the Prem. But does Sargent improve Burnley? Of course he does. That is a massive gap where we are missing. So I'll probably go back on that answer already, to be fair. Moving on to the game itself then, any injuries or suspensions? Unfortunately, we are recording this on Thursday morning, which is before, I know it's before the Scott Parker press conference. I presume it's before the Thorpe press conference as well. So we probably don't have any up-to-date information. Obviously, Lyle Foster's looking like he's out for the rest of the season for Burnley, but at the stage of recording this, it has not been confirmed. But anything on the Norwich side of things, mate?
Yeah, well, Thorpe actually decided to do sort of supplementaries rather than a press conference post-Sunderland. So we kind of got the latest updates at the state of play on Tuesday night, but we're without any sort of updated team. Yeah, very, very clever, I think. Sort of the sharp turnaround was the reasoning, but I don't think there'd have been any reason why they couldn't have done it today, but that's a different debate. There's a few injuries heading into this game. Left back, as I mentioned, is been a problematic position in terms of injuries throughout this season. They were without Callum Doyle for this game, who's on loan from Manchester City, been pretty consistent for most of the campaign. I think there was a feeling, certainly when he arrived, that there was probably a Premier League player in waiting there. His form's dipped a little bit in the second half of the season, and I think there's probably an understanding he's going to go back to Manchester City, and Norwich probably not a player they'll be able to afford to try and bring in permanently next season. So intrigued to see where he ends up. He's out now for at least sort of the next 2 or 3 games, potentially the rest of the season. Lucia Mahovo is a young left back who actually arrived from Notts County in the summer window. More of a development signing, but has managed to break into the first team and been excellent. He's out now for what looks like the rest of the season, a quad tear injury, which doesn't look too good, potentially surgery. So I think he's building up towards pre-season. Ben Krezene, who's another left back who arrived in the summer from Aston Villa, had a loan spell with a team that I won't mention on this channel last season at Ewood Park. He's been in and been a little bit up and down, I suppose, in terms of form. But he's also out with an injury, which ironically picked up at Ewood Park. So feeling a little bit, sort of bad for him, because I think that was his opportunity to really sort of stake his claim at left back, because he's not managed to do that all season. An injury stopped him from doing that. Lewis Dobbin, a lone winger, we have brought in from Villa after a spell at West Brom in the first half of the campaign. Really took to Norwich and started to show some real glimmers of quality, a couple of goals, and again, unfortunate injury at Ewood Park that's ruled him out for the rest of the season. I think there's a hope and a willingness from Norwich that they can try and bring him back for next season. Antti Sienats, who's one of our sort of forward players, he's out with a sort of sprained ankle for a couple of games, so he's going to be unavailable. Missed the game against Sunderland, so that's another issue heading into this one. They just seem to be racking up injuries far too often this season, to the point where I probably forgot someone because they just had so many. Every single player, I think, apart from maybe one or two. Oscar Svartau actually went off injured as well against in the recent game against Sunderland, so we're still waiting for a little bit of an update on him. And obviously the fact we've got no press conference, I probably can't confirm whether he'll play or not on Friday. So it's just been a list that just won't stop this season. Every single game, there's been someone picked up a knock, and Torp's quite clever in that his pre-match press conference, ask him about players. It's very much, I think that's everybody, and there's always one that he's purposely missed, kind of with the view of trying to put the opposition off the scent that there's an injury. So I wouldn't be shocked if we get to 7 p.m. on Friday night and the team news drops and somebody's out injured for the rest of the season.
Well, I was going to say fingers crossed it's Sargent, but that sounds awful. I don't hope he's out for the rest of the season. I hope he picks up a slight bug and he misses Friday night. I know you've touched on it already. You've touched on how you think Norwich will set up, but obviously you said you might go 5 at the back and try and hit us on the transition/counter attack. What sort of game are you expecting then? Are you expecting Norwich to do that and try and sit back and soak up the pressure, or are you expecting Norwich to come at Burnley? Because I think Burnley fans, myself included, are obviously hoping you actually do come at us.
I just think, given the way that, sort of permutation, I suppose, of what it means for Burnley and the way that they're going to try and want to win this game, I can just see Norwich and Torp edging slightly more towards that negative approach, I suppose, and sitting back a little bit more and trying to use the players they've got on the transition. Marcelino Nunez is a key instrument in the midfield in terms of keeping it ticking. His ability to pick passes from deep and find those attacking players, and it's been kind of a theme of this season. The way it works is very much Nunez picks up the ball, threads it through for Sargent, who's got that pace to get in behind, and when he goes one-on-one against anyone, you sort of back him to find the back of the net. Jacob Wright, who's arrived on loan from Man City in January, he's kind of become the metronome, I suppose, of the midfield. He keeps things ticking, and I think he's just growing every single game to the point where we have an option on him in the summer of about 2.3 million. And I'm thinking to myself, get that done straight away, because he looks a real quality operator, one that I think if Norwich keep him in the building for next season and he kicks on and plays as well as he have been in recent times, I can see a Premier League club being pretty quickly linked to him over next summer. So yeah, there's a few in that midfield that will keep it ticking, and obviously then again it's about that quality then in the attacking areas. If they've got Borja Sainz on the pitch, they've got Josh Sargent on the pitch, you always back them to find a goal. And so even up against the Burnley defence that obviously has only conceded 12, and I suppose set pieces have been a problem this season. Ironically, one of Norwich's set pieces goals did come against Burnley with Cordoba's header, and I think the attacking quality they've got, the defensive, the players they've got in terms of defence, in terms of the height and the fact they probably should be scoring more goals. I mean, Shane Duffy's probably not a popular name on this channel either, but look at his size, his build. You probably back him to be scoring more goals from set pieces, but I think it's only 1 or maybe 2 this season. So yeah, that's been a weakness. So if Burnley can get ahead in the game, unfortunately, I think Norwich will crumble. But if Norwich can keep it at 0-0 or they manage to get themselves ahead, then I think you could be in for a bit of a frustrating game.
Unfortunately, I tend to agree, mate. But what we did on Tuesday night was obviously frustrating, but we came up against a team who scored the most set pieces in Derby County, and we kept them out. And they absolutely peppered us, to be fair. So fingers crossed, obviously, we can do the same against you guys. Predictions, though, please, mate. What's your prediction for the game on Friday night?
Yeah, not too optimistic, to be honest. I think Norwich, as they've kind of proven on the road this season, I think it's just 4 wins and they've all pretty much been 1-0. They had a 1-0 win at Cov back in August time. They had a 1-0 win at Luton, 1-0 win at Watford. And then there's one that I'm missing off the top of my head that I'm trying to think back of. But yeah, they've not been great generally on their travels. The home form is very different. If this game would have been at Carrow Road, I probably would have maybe edged towards the draw, but I just think the fact it's Turf Moor, it's Friday night, Burnley are sort of pushing obviously for promotion and automatic promotion. The fans are all going to be in good voice, you'd imagine, and feeling there's probably an opportunity there to really sort of put the pressure, I suppose, on Leeds and Sheffield United. And for those reasons, I just think Norwich will fall short. If Burnley get the first goal, I think it'll be 2 or 3-0. But if Norwich can keep it at 0-0 for as long as possible, then potentially a 1-0. But as long as Ashley Barnes doesn't score, I think, against Norwich, then I'll take it.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you about Ashley Barnes. I'll very quickly ask you about Ashley Barnes then. What were your thoughts amongst Norwich fans then when he just suddenly randomly left and came back to Burnley? Obviously, we were all buzzing, but obviously the flip side of it, Norwich fans must have just been like, "What the hell? Like, why has he randomly gone back there?" So, what were the thought process at Norwich?
Yeah, it was a bizarre one. It was New Year's Day. We had Luton away. He came on the pitch, had a couple of opportunities to score it and sort of fluff them. And, the feeling of generally amongst him this season was very much, he's a squad player. If he's coming off the bench, we can deal with it. Obviously he doesn't really quite suit what Torup's trying to do. It's very much a Norwich group that they're trying to lower the age of sort of the squad more generally. And they shifted on a lot of the kind of the older pros, senior pros over the summer window. And then in January, it was very much the tactic again to try and get players gone. The likes of Grant Hanley departed, Christian Fashnacht, and Barnes was probably on the list where if there was an opportunity to get him gone in January rather than wait for his contract to be up in the summer, then they would look to do that to obviously free up the wages because, to be honest, he's on decent whack probably in Norwich terms where they're trying to now bring in younger players from overseas that would significantly be on lower wages. So for those purposes, I wasn't really shocked to see him move on, but it was more the speed of it and the fact it was Burnley that I think kind of took Norwich fans by surprise. That 1 minute he's playing the game and then the next day there's no rumours, no nothing that he's going to be going. And we kind of got an inkling of, I think it was the middle of that afternoon before his departure was announced that Burnley were sort of in for him. And you sort of think, okay, that doesn't really make sense. But to an extent of, it's Burnley, they're going for the league. And I think Barnes' days are probably, his best days are probably a little bit gone and past him. But you sort of think that experience, I suppose, in the group and leading a team towards promotion is probably a good thing for him. And Norwich obviously would want to get him gone. So I suppose in that sense made sense. And then the speed of it, just from like a little rumour to bang, he's gone. And the sort of the reveal, I suppose, on Burnley's channels was pretty quick. So a few surprises there, but I think most Norwich fans accepted that they needed to move on and they needed to give the opportunities to the younger lads. So for those purposes, I think he'll get a good reception. Didn't really quite work out for him down here, and I think the family were a little bit unsettled and wanted to get back towards the northwest. So all made sense for all parties, and I think we wish him all the best for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, fair enough. Before we wrap it up there, mate, do you want to let everyone know where they can find the Pink 'Un podcast and if they want to digest some Norwich content either before or after this game?
Yeah, so we're the Pink 'Un, so sort of the local newspaper down here in Norwich, the Eastern Daily Press. We've got a supplement in there, also the Evening News. Been a long-standing paper in these parts, was sort of an individual, product back in the day. But unfortunately, the way that the world's gone these days, obviously very digital now. So that's kind of where most of our content is available on YouTube. You can just find us on there, Pink 'Un. Obviously got the Pink 'Un podcast available on all your usual podcast providers, Apple, Spotify. You can find us on any of those if you put us in there. And then all the usual social media channels, obviously on X, Pink 'Un, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, you name it, WhatsApp channel. We've got everything. So just search Pink 'Un and you'll find us.
Yep, happy days. Well, Adam, we'll end it there. Thank you for coming on the show. Good luck for the rest of the season, or should I say mainly next season now that you guys will be focusing on. But of course, after Friday, please, mate.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be back on the channel, and of course, wishing Burnley the best for the rest of the season.
Cheers.